Hey, wow, it's been so long.
We're back.
Yes. Wow. How long has it been?
What? Well, we had 2 weeks of no lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're
Yeah.
back. We're so happy to be back. We can't wait for to see those usual persons who we normally see.
And to see the new persons who will be
Yes,
joining us
we are
today.
excited to meet some new persons today. So if you're joining us for the first time, be sure to leave us a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us, just tell us a little bit about yourself in the comments below. Talk to us. We like to engage. We like to hear from just everyone who's watching.
Yeah, and just so that you know who we are,
Yes, I'm Jermaine.
and I'm Renee,
And we're the Max. So today we're going to be talking about one of those topics that can be a little
Touchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are going to open up with a word of prayer, and Renee, take it away.
All right, let's pray. Father, we give you thanks for another afternoon, Lord. We give you thanks for a wonderful day. We thank you for the preservation of life, Lord, and just this opportunity to talk with each other, to share with each other, to be in this space virtually, Lord, to speak about your word, to share your heart, Lord God. We thank you for all that you have revealed to us and all that you will reveal on this live, mighty God. We pray that as we go, Lord, you will go before us, that you will be behind us and beside us as we go, mighty God. I pray your covering over this life, and I pray that as we speak, your word will take root in the hearts of those listening and in us as well, Lord God. So we give you thanks for this time. We dedicate it to you, Lord, and we say that it is all for your glory and your honor in Jesus' name.
Amen. 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 Amen.
Amen.
Right. So what we're going to be talking about today are boundaries, as we said before.
Yeah.
And boundaries are very important, right? So boundaries are really about, establishing those healthy borders around your relationship. And this allows, just for the benefit of the husband and wife to feel comfortable and develop in their own, purpose, and just, build their self-esteem. So in order to establish the right boundaries, though, we need to be clear about some things. And the areas that we're going to speak about today, we're going to speak about family, we're going to speak about friendships, we're going to speak about work, and we're going to speak about social media. So boundaries in those areas are extremely important.
So there are a lot of things. There's a lot to discuss in each of those areas, and we won't necessarily cover every single possibility or every single aspect on these four topics. But we are starting the conversation, and we're hoping that you will engage in it with us. And just for a little more context, when it is that what we are talking about today is boundaries around your marriage, not boundaries within the marriage, as in between husband and wife, but boundaries outside of that. Boundaries, and this is again specific to married couples, not dating couples, not courting couples, persons who are in the covenant of marriage. And we clarify that because there is a difference in how those boundaries are handled, um how things are handled in those different aspects of the relationship. So with that being said, I think we'll start off with a little more discussion about what boundaries are, right? Hi, Mix. Welcome, welcome. Right. So we'll start talking about what boundaries are, right? Jermaine said it earlier that we establish healthy boundaries in a relationship to allow both parties to feel more comfortable. So it helps build trust in your relationship.
Yeah.
It helps you to be more confident in your relationship and be confident in yourself.
Yeah, because if boundaries aren't set or discussed in the right way, it can lead to a breakdown of trust. It can lead you to start, feeling insecure about whether or not you can trust your husband or trust your wife
Right.
to play their part in, keeping and protecting your marriage. So it's very important that this matter is discussed, and discussed in a healthy way, discussed in a way where you're not accusing, you're not blaming the other person for anything that they may have done. I mean, this is best had as a preemptive or preventative conversation, honestly.
Correct.
But let's say something happened and now you have to have a conversation about boundaries. It helps to have it from a place where you're not making accusations, but you're just kind of sharing, finding common ground in terms of what is acceptable for your marriage, and then you take it as best as you can.
So I like to think about boundaries as guardrails in your relationship. It helps you to stay on the right path. It helps you not to stray from where it is that you have decided, the path that you have decided to go on together. No, it is not foolproof. It doesn't mean that there will never be a bump in that guardrail, like somebody may not crash into it or break through it.
Yeah.
But the whole point of having the guardrails is preventative. It is there to say, hey, crossing this line is dangerous.
Yep.
So let's stay away from that line. And we in no way encourage towing that line to say, hey, is this the edge of the boundary? Can I go a little further? We don't encourage that in any way. You want to stay far from the edge of that, boundary. So with that being said, I think we are ready to start the conversation about boundaries with family.
Oh my gosh. So as we said before, we want to, be sure that we set the right context for these conversations. We're not saying the situations that we're going to discuss apply to every family or every situation, but we're just going to state some scenarios, and if this so happens to apply to you or someone else that we strongly encourage you to just have the conversation as a husband and wife, have it as a family, to be sure that you are handling it in the right way.
Right.
So we see where when a man and woman gets married, we know from Genesis 2:24 that you're supposed to leave and cleave, right? So what that means is essentially a man and a woman come together and they start a family of their own. They leave the home and they now go to try and build their family. Now what happens is that you may have situations where a husband and wife may have to live with family. You may have a husband having to live with a wife's family, or a wife having to live with a husband's family. We also have situations where family members may have to come and live with you as husband and wife, depending on the situation. And in those three scenarios that I just mentioned, you may have a challenge in terms of just the dynamic that is there now with, essentially husband and wife living with family. So, what are some of the situations that we normally would have there?
So you may have a situation, so since we're using these examples right now, you may have a situation where the father of the wife may have very strong opinions, and she, as his daughter,
men in general, when it has to do with their home or a home that they're in, so it's almost like, it's
because they're meant to be the head of the home, so instinctively, that is their position. But we're saying now, if it is that the parent is there with the husband and wife, that parent may have very strong opinions. The husband and wife, though,
the husband now feels challenged.
Right.
The husband now feels challenged because he's in a situation where, let's say that he wants to make a decision, but the father or his father-in-law does not agree.
And where does that leave the wife? So the wife feels split because she doesn't want to dishonor her father.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to disrespect her husband.
Yeah.
She is in the middle of that and trying to figure out, who do I align with? Who do I listen to? Which direction do I go in? And how do I turn down one without it being seen as rejection?
Because in that situation, honestly, we have two main egos to have to contend with. the ego of the husband and the ego of the father-in-law. And it's actually in both those scenarios. Well, I find in the third scenario you may have, if a family member has to come and live with you, it may be different because they they may understand a little bit better that is your house, but in the situation where a
You're in
husband
their
or wife
house.
going to live exactly. So then it kind of brings this question: if it is that it's the parents' house,
Mm.
does that husband in that situation have, should he just accept that
Right.
that dynamic?
Right. So, um, for me, one of the verses that really stands out in those situations, in any marital situation, is Colossians 3:18-19, which says, "Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands
Mhm.
as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them." No, it is about when it is that you become husband and wife, that is that is a definitive moment, because now you have a covenant with that person.
Yeah.
You have a covenant with your spouse, which now becomes your primary family. And yes, even without children, that is your family. Jermaine and I, as we are now, we are a family.
Yeah.
And this is now our primary family. So my responsibility, my duty is to submit to him and him first. So even if I may not be so aligned with him, I best get aligned, because at the end of the day,
And I think we need to be clear that, so when we speak about submit here, and submission is one of those words that always gives the wrong impression, right? It's not the kind of submission where, it's not dictatorship, it's not anything
right,
to that effect, and there is a way to submit without dishonoring.
correct.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. So Michaela says that in that case, I think the discussion needs to come up at the inception of the moving in situation. Within the marriage, it is God's spouse and then everyone else. And we completely agree.
Yeah.
It is God's spouse, then everyone else.
Yeah, but the thing is, Michaela, in that case, usually one, it's in a case of either emergency or last resort that you go to move in with a family member in that way, and usually you're not thinking about all these situations or implications that are there. You're not understanding that there's going to be a difference of opinion of how things are done. You're not going to understand there may be challenges in terms of,
Authority.
Yeah, exactly. So
Or perception of authority. But I'm glad that you brought up the honoring, because I did want to clarify that when it is that we may think, so sometimes we mistake disagreeing with someone with dishonoring them,
Yes.
especially when it comes to
culturally
our
for
parents.
us, so parents, Jamaican parents sometimes take a difference of opinion as disrespect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can be perceived that way. So we do have to be sensitive about how we
Yeah.
communicate. But it is it is important on both sides, and this is a theme throughout the entire conversation about boundaries. It is important that persons on both sides of the boundaries have that conversation to say, we come into agreement that it is important that these boundaries are there.
Yeah.
Now, I know that on a personal level, I grew up with my mother, and we were very close. We have been very close for all my life, and so our relationship is a phone call every day. Every day, we communicate in some way. And when we got married, when Jermaine and I got married, it was no different. And not saying that there is anything wrong with communicating regularly with your family members, but there had to be a conversation. I had to have a conversation with my mother and say to her that, hey, Jermaine is the family now, and we love you. We love you.
Context, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we love you, but it is important to allow us to build our family, or allow us some space to do so. So she and I still talk very regularly, still communicate every day, but the expectation that she has of me now is different than she did at the start of this marriage, you know. So I think it's important that both persons come to that agreement and understand that the boundary needs to be set,
Yeah.
and both parties respect that.
Yeah. So I mean, so if there is a difference of opinion, which is where the issues of boundaries would normally come in, right? So let's say there's a difference of opinion, whatever the reason or whatever the source, there's a difference of opinion between one spouse and a parent or both parents. And now it causes this friction between husband and wife, because if it's a situation where, let's say, for example, the wife agrees with the parents on how something should be done, or let's say we view that as taking their side, it now paints a picture in the husband's heart that, wait, I'm not being respected here, I'm not being heard,
Or I'm second place.
I'm second place, and it makes him feel as if, you know, where do I stand? And it can frustrate a man being in that position of just not having, as Renee said before, it's almost instinctive for a man to be ahead and a leader. So for him to not have that respect or that agreement with his wife, let me say it that way, because I think more than anything else, even if I find in situations where, let's say, the husband and wife agree and the parents agree to something else, or there's a disagreement, that almost comes off better than one spouse sides with parents, and it's just this dynamic. And as I said, it's interesting because both parties can feel kind of left out in the cold in that situation, because it's the same on the other side. If it is that, you know, a husband sides with his mother, or doesn't want to speak to his mother a certain way, so a mom may get her own way in that situation. The wife may feel like, what, I thought I was the most important woman to you, I thought, you know, I was to be first in your life, and it starts to make her feel that dynamic, that, wait, something is wrong here, and
Right.
it creates this tension.
And it's so these things that we're speaking of, we are speaking from experience with these very with some of these very situations. Not
experience, so we've never had that situation where we had to
where we're
live
living,
with, yeah,
but we've had the situation of having to set those boundaries with our parents, because there was this expectation of us that they would still remain the primary focus of our lives after we got married, and that they would have.
I think that was an unconscious expectation.
Right.
This, yeah, because on there's a side where, depending on how close you are to your family, when you get married, a family feels almost like a sense of loss. Like we don't have you in the same way that we normally do anymore. You know, you're now spending your time,
all your time with this other person.
And we'll talk about that a lot when we get to the friendships, because that's the dynamic that's created with friendships. Because when you're close with your friends, hang out every weekend, or you do things regularly, now you're married, and it feels like you're now having to have this great separation from your friends. It creates a certain dynamic there.
Right. So I'm glad you raised that separation situation with the family, because that is where, and this is why we do have to be gracious with each other. You know what I mean? Yes, makes me pray for you. And hi, that's audio. We do have to be gracious with our families, because I know that I used to be a little cut and dry, like moms. Genesis said, leave and cleave, you know, so I'm gone.
She was like, Jeremy, what happened? What happened? Where's the leaving and cleaving? I was like, Renee, you have to handle these things delicately.
Yeah,
because so that's the thing about it, you know, because when it is, you're in a situation where, as a husband, you feel like you're choosing between your wife and your mother, it's not an easy choice, because
it really shouldn't be a choice. So that's why now, yes, they feel like they're losing a son, especially if they're the only son.
And my mother's one son.
Yes, and Jermaine is the only son. So that's exactly the dynamic that we went through. And we give God thanks that over time, you know, those issues have been worked out. Yeah, but it brings me to the next point, that in order for those issues to have been worked out, he had to, just like I had to have a conversation with my mother, he had to have a conversation with his. And it is important to know that for these boundaries to be set around your marriage,
Yeah.
each of you have an individual responsibility
Yeah.
to have the conversations that are necessary to set those boundaries so that people understand where you stand.
Yeah.
They understand what value you put on this union.
Yeah.
And how they are expected to treat it. Because whether we realize it or not, we train people how to treat us. We tell people what is okay.
Yes.
By what we condone.
Yes. So yes. Oh my, that you have, it does feel like torture because, as I said before, it's so hard because, and so here's a situation that happens sometimes. There are times when you find that you may not agree with your spouse, but you feel like you're obligated to show agreement because you don't want the spouse to get offended, right? So that can happen sometimes. And there have been, so in the past, so I have a different perspective on it now, but in the past, I was like, what's the big deal? Like, it's not that big a deal. You know, you're making a big fuss, maybe just jealous. I don't know. I used to just think, I used to view it as Renee just being unreasonable, you know. So certain situations, I just think that she was just making a big fuss about nothing, you know. But I mean, I have a different, you know, perspective now. Don't smile at me. I have a different perspective now, and that's mainly because I think what the Lord has shown me is that there. So even in a case now where I don't agree with Renee, it doesn't mean I have to compromise in the love and the respect and the consideration that I give her. So even in the situations where I disagree, so I may say, well, I feel like this situation is the case. I'm not doing it at the expense. So I'm not lifting up one person at the expense of another.
That's right. And as you talk about, as you bring up disagreements now, sometimes what happens, and we mentioned families being close, that's how I mentioned it as well, families being close, you may be tempted to go to your family to complain about your spouse.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yes.
And
which kind of adds, it kind of makes things worse. It makes things worse. But continue first, let me.
So your first inclination really should be work it out with your spouse.
Yeah.
Try to work it out with your spouse.
So here's the thing though. Here's the thing. And this is a hypothetical situation there. Hypothetical. So I have a disagreement with Renee. Renee and I are upset. I want a place to just kind of talk, reason it out so that I'm not, you know, angry, because I don't want to talk to her angry. I have a close relationship with my family. I talk to my family first. That happens with a lot of people. They have this relationship with their family. They don't view it as complaining or dishonoring their spouse. But again, we're talking about boundaries. How much do you share? Is it right to share certain aspects of your marriage with your family, knowing that they're only hearing one side of the story? So they're now building up a perception about your spouse that you may not even want them to have, because when you pass that situation, there's this sort of angst or anger towards the spouse, and you wonder why. It's probably because of the information that you shared
previously. Some incomplete information, because you share your side of the story and then you may not share the resolution.
Yeah.
So in their minds, they're still having this person in this light
as the bad guy.
Right. They're seeing them in this light. But our recommendation in those situations, any sort of conflict resolution that you are seeking external advice, you seek it together.
Yes.
Together.
So it's actually
both sides of
recommended
the story.
if there's a disagreement, if you have a close relationship with your family, it would almost be better that you agree. And this is something we talk to couples about in premarital counseling. We ask them, who is it that you feel comfortable going to for counsel if you have a problem? And what that means is, so depending on the issue that we have, it's actually better we go to a neutral third party and say, hey, we have this disagreement. What's your advice? right? And then that way we can receive a certain counsel, we get past it to a certain point, then we may share that experience with our family from a more balanced perspective,
Right.
right?
Thanks for that. That's all.
Everything.
Yeah, so she says her mother always picks up for her husband, and her dad will say, "Go and work it out." So, if the family is a strong unit and not clinging, then sharing a difficult period can actually help, but it does depend.
And there are no perfect families,
right?
So
We think again, the title, the topic here is protecting your marriage, right? Boundaries and protecting your marriage. So, a part of that protection of your marriage is having a neutral third party who you can go to together to have that discussion. Yes, you may each have your confidence, but
should you have confidence?
Should you
that sounds like another boundary issue.
Right. So we're getting there.
Yeah.
We're getting there. Yes, Mick. So you may forgive your spouse and then your family.
Exactly. No, because here's the thing, because you share the problem with your family, but you don't share the solution.
Right. And so yeah, I think we have spoken about, we've hit the points about family that we wanted to talk about, and it's just to give us something to think about. And if you guys have any questions or any comments about family and boundaries with families, I mean, there, as we said earlier, there's a lot to talk about in this area, but we've picked some specific points to raise. And if you have any others, then be sure to join the conversation and let us know what those are. But we're just something a little less tense. I don't know if it's any less tense. We're gonna kind of segue into the conversation about friendships. We kind of touched on some of the points earlier.
You know what? This is hard too, because when we got married, I felt, at least for a little bit, that I had to sacrifice so many friendships, and so we're talking about a few types of friendships here. Friendships with the opposite sex, and friendships in general. Now, my lovely wife, does not like Renee in terms of me and friendships of the opposite sex. Renee has a black and white policy, right? So Renee is like, friendships of the opposite sex, I should be here. They should be probably in Montego Bay, and maybe speak like once a year, and that's enough. Like that.
You know, say make it sound bad. It's admittedly, guys, it really was that bad at one point.
Thank you.
At the start of our relationship. I was gonna say,
am I lying?
It was that way. Okay. It's no longer that way.
At the start of our marriage.
No, you didn't.
I said at the start of our marriage. Did I not say that, Michaela? I said at the start of our marriage.
But yes, it was like that in the earlier days, because I was heavily wounded coming into this relationship. I had a lot of issues with jealousy. I had a lot of issues with insecurity and self-esteem, and I was not whole coming into this. I was a broken person coming into this relationship, and I brought all of that brokenness into our relationship and then eventually into our marriage. So I wasn't at a place where I could see Jermaine talking to another female and not think.
And the truth is, when I was younger, I didn't have a full appreciation for that boundary.
That's correct.
So I may not have been the best. So there's this thing that sometimes happens when a man settles down, when a man finds a wife, right? No, we're actually not talking about hugging or winking. So what happens to me? So when I was younger, I had a very flexible approach and perspective as it relates to women. I thought it was okay to flirt and have those kind of conversations that kind of led people on, and it gave me a sort of rush and exhilaration, because I was like, it made me feel good. I never thought that it was detrimental in any way,
and it stressed me right out. Why? Because apart from all of that brokenness that I was talking about, my expectation of relationship where we would have gone through and said, okay, yes, we're dating now,
Yeah.
right? We are exclusively dating,
And bona fide.
and yes, and that is how we were proceeding. And then to see or to know that he was still flirting with other women and all of that, or getting them.
I was not walking with the Lord, okay? Before you judge me, I was not walking with the Lord.
Right. So it's our story for his glory, right? For
Yeah.
God's glory. So, right. At that time, it was very stressful for me because I couldn't understand, why would you think that it is okay to do this? Why do you think it is okay to have another woman rubbing down your chest? Why do you think that it is? Why do you think that it is okay?
Take it easy. Take it easy on me.
To have
Take it easy.
other women so close in your personal space, and it would be like, oh, sure, it's no big deal, it's just my friend. Or other woman would be answering his phone, and I'm like, how is this okay? How do you think that this is okay? And it was,
we weren't married.
It's okay.
No, I'm just saying we weren't married. So
That's
those
true.
situations that you're talking about, that wasn't marriage.
That's true. We weren't
wasn't
married. We
marriage.
weren't married at the time. But I'm just saying, even coming into our dating relationship, I had this expectation that he would have set boundaries with his friends and said, okay, now.
Exactly. And Brian, I feel hot right now. I feel so hot. I feel so hot.
But the point of it is that I had an expectation coming into
Yeah.
a relationship, an exclusive relationship, to say, hey, there should be boundaries with our friends now. They need to know that you're in a relationship, and therefore they need to respect
Yes,
that.
and so that is definitely 100% true, and it's very important because even though we weren't married, for those situations that Renee outlined, it was not. It's essentially wrong for me to be in a relationship with Renee, committing my faithfulness and honor and respect to her, and straddling that fence between what was happening with members of the opposite sex. It was wrong. So as I said, it took me a while to fully appreciate just how important it was to maintain that boundary, that distance, that separation, to say, well, I have made a choice in who I'm dating, in who I'm courting, who I'm planning to maybe see how far the relationship can go. And so this part we're talking about is leading up to marriage, because the practices and the habits that you take from before you were married, if they're not dealt with, will seep into the marriage and cause the same issues, if not more. Because when you're married now, there's an expectation that, okay, you've made a choice, you've settled down. Every other member of the opposite sex needs to maintain a certain distance. But the problem that I found myself in is that I didn't make that distinct line, that distinct boundary wasn't there. So, what I found in those situations, almost all of them, I had a role to play in that boundary being set, because it in most of those situations, sure, I've met women who were forward, but no woman could overpower me or start to have certain conversations with me that I did not entertain. So that's very important. Those boundaries, when you're married, can lead to open doors in your marriage, cause issues for years to come.
So sometimes, and culturally, we might feel like, oh, it's just a little flirting. We're just talking. We're not having sex. We're not.
Yeah.
I'm still being faithful.
Yeah. Because there's this line, you can do everything you want to do except sex. Up until that line, that's being faithful. Sex alone is where you're unfaithful. That's
right.
Not true.
It's not true. It's such a skewed mentality, because that emotional play that you're going into, that those inappropriate conversations, those lines that you're crossing, open doors spiritually, and give access to your relationship. They give access to your marriage,
and they have physical consequences, because so there's a victim usually, and I use the term victim loosely. There's a victim in those situations. One, the spouse, who probably has no idea what's happening, and the person who is outside the marriage now, who will be labeled as somebody who encroached on your marriage.
As the
when really-
homewrecker.
Yeah.
Yeah, or whatever other phrase or terminology is used. But the bottom line is that you, and I come back to this, we spoke about it on a family, and we're speaking about it again on the friendships. Each individual has a responsibility. As I said, you train people, you tell people what is okay to do.
Yeah.
You tell them if it is okay to cross this line with you. So each person in the marriage has a responsibility of setting what those lines are, because you're two people becoming one. You're two individuals becoming one. So you would have had friends before.
Yeah.
You would have had relationships before. But as you are coming into this marital commitment, as you're coming into this relationship now as husband and wife,
your priority is to your spouse.
yeah. And everybody else comes after. No, it doesn't mean that you are to make people feel second rate or like they're less than valuable, because that is not true.
All right. So can we take Jeremy now to the frying pot now?
Yeah.
And so there's another side to the friendships that we need to look out for, and that is how much we share.
Mhm.
Now, usually if a marriage is going through a hard time, and actually I'm probably still in the frying pot for this one, because when we shared in the story of our first 5 years, there was a point when it was really, we're at a point that we're right near a breaking point. And during that time, I was seriously contemplating divorce. I was thinking, I just wanted Renee to say the word divorce and I would have been gone. And what was happening during that time is that I had, friends that I was just, I just shared, hey Jermaine, how is marriage? It's stressful, Renee is being a real ball and chain. And it was just, I spoke very unflattering about Renee in those situations, because I didn't feel her support. I didn't feel she was, supporting the business I had at the time. I didn't feel that she was being very reasonable. I think she was expecting too much from me, and it was just a really hard, dynamic that was happening. And I had to do like some. I've prayed about that and repented so many times, because not only did I feel like I dishonored her, but I dishonored God, because I wasn't, reflecting our marriage in the right way.
Right. So that's when I raised that point that we're to be careful not to lose good friends by thinking we need only our spouse, and that's very true.
Wow,
that's a very solid point.
Yes.
And so that's why I was saying that we should not treat persons as if they're second rate, or if they're or as if they're
community.
They're no longer important, right? Because community is so important. But with what Jermaine, in addition to what Jermaine was saying about the first 5 years of our marriage and how it went, I was guilty of it as well, because I was going to persons and complaining about him, and it was
yes. So can I say Renee is in the frying pot now, please? Can you put Renee in the frying
pan? Please stop saying frying pot.
It's frying pot. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, I was in that situation as well, where I would go to my single friends at that and be complaining about my husband, to say, I'm so frustrated and I can't do this anymore. All of my money, all of my salary is going into this business every month, and I'm not seeing any returns. There's no return on my investment. And the kind of advice that I was getting was, what is a loan you give him? You need to charge him interest and make sure that you sign a contract and that he'll pay you back your money. You know what I mean? Woo! But you can just imagine what that approach would have done to our marriage.
And you know what? What that led to? Something that I noticed. Renee started to lose respect for me.
That is true. That is exactly what happened, because I was painting a certain picture of him.
Yes, and so it's so, in fairness to friends, because we have great friends, what they were doing is responding to us being in distress.
Right.
They were giving their counsel and their feedback based on the picture that we painted. So
Right.
we at no point blame our friends
No.
for any advice they would have given us in the past, because they're looking out for us.
And we weren't being fair to each other.
Yeah.
So we would paint the worst picture of each other, and then our friends would respond to that. And it comes back to why we were saying it's important for you to have the conversation here first before you go external for any counsel, because working out, understanding what your issue is so important before you go external, because I would have
need the right counsel.
Yeah, I would have one perception, he would have one perception, and we go to two different people and they get two different pictures, and we get two different sets of advice, and we come back and we're butting heads even worse than before.
Here's the thing, I used to always know when Renee came to me with a solution from a friend. I was like, that don't sound like you.
I think we
that don't sound like you. So it was obvious.
Yeah, so it says that love languages are important, and ensure that the spouse is being loved in their specific love language, and avoid sometimes the need to go to someone else.
Well, so here's the thing. So for a young marriage, I would understand, because it takes a while to build trust. But when I say I understand, I'm not saying that you should do it, because it still means that you have to be very careful, because I believe every marriage have a period of strengthening, of the refining process is throughout the whole marriage, trust me. But you have this period where you're learning to trust each other, you're learning how each other responds to issues and problems. So when it's just really dangerous going outside, because imagine if somebody's giving you advice not having the full context, it's gonna cause a strain, because they may propose a solution, you mention it is taken up, but it ends up being wrong. Now you have to take responsibility for the decision that you made.
Right. But as you said, that something came to mind. There's a management theory about groups, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it speaks about the stages of development of a group. So you have forming, storming, norming, and performing, right? And so you form, and it's similar for a marriage. It just hit me. It's similar for a marriage. You form that marital bond.
Are you trying to project manage for a marriage right now?
No, you go through this period of storming where you're figuring out the nuances of each other. How does this work? How will the two really mesh and blend into one? And then you get into this norming phase where, okay, you kind of level out, you understand each other a little better, you know how to work together, you find a group.
And that could take years.
Yeah, and then you go into performing, where you're just a shot, like everything is on point, and you can work together well. So there is a process for your marriage, just like any other group formation, and it is good to appreciate each of those stages, so that in that storming phase you don't feel like you need to run.
Storm will feel like a storm sometimes.
Exactly, it will feel like a storm, and it's not for you to run, but we're talking about friendships, right?
Yes.
So there is a conversation as well about having. Wait, before we go there, Michaela had asked a question earlier about when we were talking about family. We were talking about having a neutral third party, and the question was, who is an appropriate third party?
All right, you want to see that one? I'm just checking on comments that we might have had.
Sure, no problem. So who is an appropriate third party? Or recommendation is usually not a best friend of either one person, not a parent of either one person, but someone like, so if you go through premarital counseling, if you have access to your counseling that way, that would be a good neutral third party to go to. Having like a church family, a mentor, a disciple, or persons like that you can go to as a neutral third party, someone who is not involved in the everyday, in the day-to-day of your life, of your marriage. Why? Because you want,
there is a natural, and this is So persons who aren't trained at giving counsel may 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 tend to let their natural emotion and tendency overtake them. And what I mean by that is if somebody knows Renee well, knew have known her all their life,
Yeah.
when Renee comes in distress, then it may lead them to kind of be protective of her and offer counsel that is pro Renee but anti Jermaine. You know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
So we do have couples who still come to us, and again, we recommend going together. So
Yes,
couples
yes.
will come to us together and say, "Hey, this is
And
this is
sometimes
situation."
persons will reach out to us individually. So what I will usually do if somebody reaches out individually, because sometimes you just want a second opinion, depending on what it is. Usually, what you do when if you have to go somebody, if you have to go to somebody solo, speak about how you feel, how something is impacting you.
Right.
Get feedback on what you're feeling and don't make it about the other person.
Right. Don't try to assume that you know the motives of the other person,
Yes, yes.
or you know how the other person is feeling.
Yeah.
So you can speak about, and that's important. That was an important point. You can speak about your own feelings in a one-on-one.
Yeah.
How you are perceiving the thing, what it is that you are processing,
Yeah.
and that is fine. That is fine.
Yeah.
But
Because-
again, you're
because-
not bringing your aspirations or your assumptions about your
Yeah.
spouse into that conversation.
So there are some situations that for me, so for example, with Renee, there are times when we have disagreements and I know that I'm struggling with anger, for example. I don't even need counsel. I just need to take care of that anger before I can see things clearly, before I can resolve the issue in a meaningful way. So what I try to do is speak to, let's say, my disciple. I'm really, angry right now. I'm battling this anger. I don't know what to do. Then I can get counsel for my anger,
Right.
and then I can now go back to Renee and say, okay, let's talk about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why understanding ourselves and what it is that we're going through, what it is that we're processing, that is so important as well in a marriage, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah. So the final part I wanted to talk about with friendships is, the very, very popular and common question: should married persons take counsel from single persons? Well, we're really talking about your friends. Your friends who aren't married, should you take counsel? We're gonna actually ask you. You tell us below. Should married persons take counsel from their single friends?
What are your thoughts on that one?
What are your thoughts? All right, so we're gonna move to. We're gonna do work first.
We're gonna talk about work.
All right.
But well, one other thing before we go to work, with friends, with the friendships, we did mention having friends of the opposite sex. We should state that we do not recommend best friends of the opposite sex, simply because. So we're not going to delve into the conversation, but simply because
we'll be doing a video on it, but we won't cover it in this live.
Right. Simply because even though you might think that, oh, this person is just a friend, it has never gone there and it will never go there. The truth is you don't know. Vulnerability is something that happens in relationships, and when persons are vulnerable, you don't know what lines may be crossed. You don't know how someone will respond.
I think you're putting a lot of pressure on that single best friend who, if I'm going to that single best friend, hey, I'm going through this with Renee, hey, I'm having a hard time, hey, my sex life with Renee is this. You are putting that person under pressure now. I didn't say it was bad or good. So I'm sharing these details with someone. This person is searching for a spouse. It's sometimes very hard for them to just withstand that connection and start to think about you in an inappropriate way. And when I say inappropriate, it's not just sexual. It could be an emotional connection. It could be that they start to, go to you for everything. So when they are now married, they still have that unhealthy soul tie with you. So that's something that you should watch for.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So in terms of whether well, we had asked about taking counsel from single persons, and Sophie says no. It does have some context around it, but generally speaking, it is not a recommendation because of the nuances of marriage. And the truth is, every marriage is different.
Yeah.
So you can even get marital advice from a married couple that is not
Yeah,
best for
probably
your
not the
marriage.
best. Yeah. So yeah, because it's not like we're saying it's impossible for a single person to give you good advice. It's almost like you wouldn't want to take advice from somebody who, well, let me not say that. Never mind.
Let's just say it this
Never
way.
mind.
It would be like us who are we who are waiting on children giving someone parenting advice.
Yeah.
What we know.
Yes.
Seriously.
No, so, and it's not to say we won't have the occasional gem, but we don't have the experience.
Right.
It's really about the experience. Right?
Experience is very, very important in terms of counsel, providing counsel for somebody.
Yeah.
So yes, Rachel, oh gosh, gosh.
Yeah. Watch the replay. Trust me, we prayed and prayed because last week we had that power outage.
Last week was very rough, guys. And we're so grateful. Let us just pause a minute to give thanks. Give thanks to God because the prayers that have gone up for us to be able to do this live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we prayed for the weather to hold, for the light to stay on, for every equipment to work, because we're sensing a lot of opposition for this live in particular. So yeah. All right. So let's get to work.
Right.
So we did a husband. We hope we did we did a video on work husband, work wife.
Yes.
And we hope you watched it, right? Because a lot of what we spoke about in that video, we're going to assume that you're gonna watch that video, right? If you haven't done so already. But we in the work husband, work wife video, we spoke about just this dynamic that we see culturally. That's my work husband, that's my work wife. There's this boundary that some persons cross in terms of that relationship. And the same context we spoke about in terms of friendships and the opposite sex can happen at work because you spend a lot of your time there.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of this may be pre-COVID, but let's say you had those offices where you go on those work trips together, you have lines together, you go to the bar every Friday to chill out after work, and you have those situations where you have the opportunity to get really close to a member of the opposite sex who is not your spouse. And it can create this kind of blurred line because, again, I believe the most dangerous connection you can have with the member of the opposite sex is an emotional connection. Because if you have that emotional connection, it will pull you into the point now you start to think physically. And there are some persons who say, we've been friends for 20 years, 30 years, that has never happened. They've been married, we're fine. The truth is, you don't know what goes on in the mind of the person. So to you, the friend on the outside, everything may be good, but you don't know
the impact on the other person.
Yes, or the impact on the third person, which is the spouse at home now, because again, the same situation is created because we spend so much time at work. When you have challenges, when you have situations, you're going to your work husband or your work wife, and you're leaving out your spouse, and that creates a dynamic where you have four persons in the marriage, not you, your spouse, and God, but you, your spouse, God, and a fourth person.
Right. So we did delve into those details in the video. So we're not going to go too much into that now. What we are going to talk about today on the live, though, is some other boundaries.
Yes.
Boundaries relating to work.
Yeah.
Boundaries that we set with the work itself.
Yeah.
So sometimes we may have marital issues, and in order to circumvent dealing with those issues,
go knee deep into work.
Right. We dive into the work instead, and we become so focused on our work that we don't have time to deal with
Yeah.
our spouse. Like, oh, sure, I'm
Yeah,
busy.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
I'm
busy.
just gonna focus on work. So we're actually excelling at work, and our
Doing
marriage is
great.
failing. Yeah.
Right. Because you've chosen a, a route of avoidance
Yeah.
than to say, I don't want to deal with the reality of my life,
Yeah.
the reality of my
we
marriage.
so we work really late. We stay as late as we can. Oh, you don't have some extra work for me to do? I'll take it because
Yeah.
we don't want to go home.
So it's not even this no is not even about another person.
Yeah.
This is about the individual in the marriage,
Yeah.
the husband or the wife who's going to decide to focus on work instead of focusing on dealing with the situation in their marriage. Now, another scenario with work, it may not be an intentional avoidance. It may be just an inability or a lack of a desire to say no. So more and more things are being piled on you at work, and it means that
And you compromise the trust of your spouse by, so you may agree with your spouse that you're gonna spend the weekend
right.
out of town, or we're going to the beach, or we're going to do this. Like, all right, you cannot say to Renee that we're going to the beach and we don't go. All right.
Yeah, I'm a beach girl. I'm a water baby. But what we're saying is that if it is that you are so entrenched in your work that you're compromising your commitments to your spouse,
Yeah.
then that is a problem, and that is a boundary that has been crossed.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying to your spouse is that they are no second place to your work.
Yeah.
And
And usually those persons we find actually have a problem saying no altogether. So family may pull from you, friends may pull on you, a stranger may pull on you, and your spouse is like, wait, what happened? So instead of doing this thing that we've committed to do, you're now doing it for everybody else, and I'm here waiting. And it creates that dynamic. I used to have those situations where, because of the business that I used to do, somebody would call me 1 a.m. to fix a computer for them, and Renee is like, it's 1 a.m. though. Like, I couldn't wait till tomorrow morning. And I never understood the importance of just saying, it's 1 a.m. Call me tomorrow morning. It could be an emergency. It could be that you need that machine to work 8 a.m. for you. But I can't take the call. It's really that simple. But I never understood the importance of having that boundary.
right, so that separation between work and home is very important, and it's a little tricky now with COVID and a lot more persons working from home.
We're
Those
actually working
lines
longer hours now, I think.
those lines get blurred so easily, and yeah, you may find that you're sitting at your desk, you're sitting at your computer for longer than you were when you were going out to work,
So
because
you're actually now creating the same distance that was there. So you think you're home now, you're spending more time, but are you really?
yeah, so it's very, very important. And yes, Michaela, it does begin
Yeah.
in singlehood too. It is important for you to set those
Boundaries.
boundaries with work, to say these are my working hours. This is my working time, and you hear it a lot in work circles, work-life balance, right? What does that
That's
look
a made
like?
up word.
What does that look like for you, and how does it become a reality for you? Where does work stop, and where does your life outside of work begin?
Yeah.
And when it comes to having a spouse, or as Michaela said, even just living the rest of your life as a single person, your other commitments, because you do have other commitments in your life.
Yeah.
Where does that start? Where does work end? It's not to say that you won't have occasion where you may need to work late, or you may need to work
we're
on
not
a
talking about the
weekend.
exceptions.
Right. It's not the exception. It is just to say that you need to know where the lines are,
Yeah.
and where you say stop.
Yeah. Yeah. So Michaela just posted that there's a lot to discuss in the premarital. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But here's the thing, you're not going to get everything perfect before you get married, and that's the truth.
You just have to.
But these these videos and these sessions that we're doing, the hope is that you'll be better prepared, because a lot of the things that we went through and the challenges that we had, I had the brilliant idea to forego premarital counseling. So a lot of the things that we went through was probably because the fact that we missed out on it. So
Yeah, so we never had the foresight, we never had the discussions before we went in. So everything was kind of trial and error
yeah,
as we
a lot of
went.
error.
So Harry says, for the singles who are recovering workaholics, when do you set the boundary at premarital?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So here's the thing: if you know that you're a workaholic, because you have an obligation to God to honor, love your spouse as Christ loved the church.
Mhm.
If you're a husband, so your priority, even more important than your work, even more important than your ministry, even more important than your relatives and friends, is your spouse. Your spouse is how you show love to God as well. So if it is that you're a workaholic, what you're saying is that work is an
Recovering.
idol.
Right.
Yeah, recovering. So and it could be that you are so committed to doing an excellent job at work, you're not seeing the effect it may be having on
On
your
your
marriage.
spouse,
So we're
right.
not saying you should have a substandard for your work. You should work as unto the Lord,
Yes.
but you should have that part of you that says, okay, there's only so much that I can do at work and no more, and the rest I leave in God's hands, and the rest of the time my focus is my marriage.
And the truth is, guys, the same risk is there with ministry.
Yeah.
The very same risk is there,
You
because
can-
sometimes we can get so caught up in ministry
There are persons who are ministering all over the place,
and their home is falling apart.
yeah.
So that is an important line, and we are so grateful for our leaders. We're so grateful for our church leaders who encourage us, who will be the ones to say, hey,
Too much
draw
ministry.
breaks.
Too much ministry.
Draw breaks. You're doing too much right now. You need to take a step back and spend some time with your husband. You need to take a step back and take care of your marriage. So it's important. Again, it comes back to having the right community around you, right? It's very, very important, because sometimes, I know this is a little segue, but sometimes when it comes to the ministry side of things, because there's usually a shortage or a perceived shortage of volunteers,
That's definitely
when
a
you-
tangent. Yeah.
when you have persons who are willing to work, you find that that person or those persons are involved in so many things
Yeah.
because they can do them. And I think we need to have a whole different conversation
Yes,
about
we
that.
do.
But
We do.
the point is that we need to understand that when it comes to marriage,
Yeah.
our spouse has to have that, like God, spouse.
Yeah.
Everything else falls in line after that, and we have to be very intentional about setting that priority in our lives, so that our spouse is not neglected, our home is not neglected.
Yeah. So we have one more point to cover before we go into that section. We want to thank you everyone so much for being here. Those who have been here from the start, and even if you join afterwards, thank you so much. We are asking you to, leave this video a like if you found value in what we've been saying so far. If you have not subscribed to our channel as yet, feel free to do so. Share this video on your Facebook pages if you have them, and help us bring more persons into the conversation. All right. Thank you so much for those who have done it already.
Yes.
So the last part we're going to talk about is boundaries in terms of social media. And when we were discussing this went on for a long time. And I think we maybe need to have that warm up conversation, because it got very tricky. So here's the issue with social media. If we leave our social media settings at default, it's gonna be a challenge for a man. I can't speak to Renee because I don't know from her side. But what I had to do, it started when I was doing discipleship 2 years ago. I started to realize that for me to have the right mindset, a healthy mindset towards my marriage, in regards to just lust and what I was seeing and the type of conversation. Because even if a big part about social media and the impact for your marriage is the things that are shared. So the memes or the conversations people have. Because for example, if you're in a marriage group, when you when you sometimes see what other people are going through, you can almost start to project that onto your own marriage.
Mhm.
So if it is that what you're hearing, what you're seeing is that women are lazy or they they're not keeping themselves in this kind of say, oh, whatever it is, you start to assume that in your spouse. So you need to be guarding yourself from social media because it can heavily influence your way of thinking, it can influence your perspective,
And
it can,
and
yeah.
I think it starts, this is one of those things that also starts before you get married. What are you feeding yourself about marriage? What are you
Yes.
So it comes back to Philippians 4:8, right? Which says whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, pure, lovely,
Think on
admirable,
these things.
if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things, right? So it is important what we feed ourselves, because you can't plant an orange seed and get apple off the tree, right? The seeds that we plant produce the fruit in our lives. So if it is that we are feeding ourselves on um, things that are derogatory about marriage,
Yeah.
then that's the fruit that you're going to get, because you're going, as Jermaine said, you're going to start
And
expecting and projecting.
It's such a subtle thing, because what happens is that a lot of the attacks on marriage through social media is a couple of things, right? You may see a post about women being thirsty, or women just being after your money, or women just being no good, and those things can start to seep just into your mind. And so when you're dealing with your spouse, you are not realizing that you're treating them in a way that because we all have those friends in our networks that don't seem to have any regard for anything. So like they'll just post and repost anything. And a lot, so there's this kind of subconscious way that we believe what a person posts is what they believe or agree with. That's not always true. A lot of people just repost something because they found it funny, or they thought that was just a novel thing to say. But we may just kind of receive that as gospel,
Right.
and it can really harm our marriage.
Right. So, I mean, that is a boundary to set the types of accounts that you follow from the perspective of guarding your own heart,
Yeah.
what it is that what seeds you are planting in your heart about marriage, about your spouse, about that kind of thing. It also guards you from certain open doors like lust and greed, etc. It also helps you when it is that you are seeing all of these quote unquote perfect lives of others, people with the perfect marriages that don't have any problems, that don't have any issues. You're looking at them, you're
And hold on, it's not that. So the thing about a picture of somebody smiling, you don't even know what went on before they took that picture.
yeah.
A lot of times in the past, when we would have shared pictures on trips, we just spent the last two hours arguing. We're about to leave. Renee's like, can we get a photo before we leave, please?
Yeah.
And so you just don't know.
So, right. So we know that we can't base our lives off of what social media says, right? Of what people share on social media, because really with social media, you only know as much as we tell you.
Yeah.
Right. And that is just facts. That's just the truth. You can't tell what a person's life is like
Just
from a
from
series
you
of pictures. You
Especially
can't.
since sometimes it takes you maybe like 30 minutes to do a post. You have to kind of massage and like even like sometimes I'll see Renee post a picture of food and she'll take 20 photos and she shares one.
Exactly.
Right?
But talk the truth. Tell the truth. How many persons
we want to present the best
right
image,
and
yeah.
and I think all of us do it to some extent. You can take 15 selfies and you're posting one.
You post the one that you think looks the best.
Right.
Yeah.
Because because that is what you want to share. You want to share the best aspect or what you perceive as the best aspect. And so everybody doing it across all their pages. And whether it's filtered or unfiltered or whatever, the point is that it is it is there to tell the story that the person, the account holder wants you to hear. And so
Rate, you have
Reggie?
no idea.
Yes, girl, we argue.
You have no idea. You have
But
no
the
idea.
truth is that it has evolved over the years. Arguments used to be very explosive,
Very dangerous.
never physical, but very explosive between
Yeah.
us. And
Have a strong-willed wife. That's all I'll say.
yeah, for true. I was like Miss Independent. So you couldn't talk to me. But
Can I talk to you now?
yes, you can, of
Oh
course.
wow, have it on video.
Thank
Okay.
God for Jesus.
Mm.
But seriously, when that changed, when we started to have discussions instead of arguments, is really when we started seeking Christ.
Yeah.
And over time, it evolved into us having discussions.
And it
will
doesn't
still
mean
get-
that we still don't have
it will
those
still
kind
get
of
heated.
yeah. We're not gonna stray the conversation, but I'll just say that because when two people are learning in a marriage, you're learning about each other, you're learning
Mhm.
about yourself, and you never stay static.
Right.
Both of you are growing and maturing, hopefully. And with each new season, it's almost like you have to relearn because there are some things that for the most part remain the same. But the truth is sometimes we kind of hold on to what we think,
Or what we knew of the
yes,
person.
instead of seeing them for who they are now. you know?
Right. And so we treat them as they used to be and not as they
Yeah.
are now. And
Yeah.
that can lead to some issues. So yeah. Short
life?
answer, yes.
I do.
Yes,
Right.
we still do. But back to the social media.
Yeah. So we were saying you have to be mindful about the type of accounts you follow. So what I've done, this is something I do personally. There are accounts who I unfollow. So for example, very common thing I'll see is that I'll see photos of somebody sharing, some image of them at a party or some image of them on the beach or whatever it is. If it's a photo that, and sometimes I'm talking about believers, right?
Mhm.
The images that are shown are such that I'm like, I am a man of God, but at the same time, this would be challenging for even somebody who is not saved because of just the image. And sometimes I know that women they aren't trying to be that way because sometimes you're just blessed. And so the things that you have to show, then there's nothing on unless you put on a bag, there's this
Like
it's
some
just not
curves
going
can't
to-
be covered.
Yes.
Like no matter what you put on, some curves gonna show.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging.
Yeah.
It can be challenging for persons, and as Jermaine said, even as a man of God, you still have flesh.
Men are visual creatures.
Yes, so you have to deal with that and be proactive about how you deal with that. If it is that you know that you have had a challenge with lust, you have had a challenge
With
with
pornography.
pornography or whatever it is, you need to guard yourself against that. If it is that you have taken the decision and the stance that
And then there's
I
also
no longer
the
want to-
workout pages, the fitness pages.
yes,
It's
that's a lot of
just-
them. A lot of them are advertising in a very highly sexual way.
Yeah.
So you have to be honest with yourself, honest enough with yourself to say, you know what, this is posing a challenge for me, and I'm going to step away from it. And it's not limited to just lust and sexual immorality. It's not limited to
We're
that
talking
thing.
about sliding in the DMs.
Well, no, hold on. But even things like food pages.
Oh
No,
my gosh, yes.
no. For me, and I openly share that for me, this weight journey is a challenge. And I would have gone on a journey before and got to a good point, a good place, and I was steady there and I was nice. And then over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've regained a lot of weight. And it has brought up a lot of things for me in terms of self-image and how comfortable I am in my own skin right now. And
so you have to guard yourself from that.
Right. No, yeah. I love cooking. I love experimenting with food. I love trying new foods and all of that. No, I know my philosophy is moderation. So I will try these things in moderation. But I also know that the truth is, if you are flooding me enough with bread pudding factory, I'm going to go find bread pudding factory, and it may not be in moderation. So I have to be careful.
Or she'll buy 3 bags of the big plant chips.
The St. Peter's plant chips. Why am I so nice? No. But but yes. So I know that I have to be monitoring my feed in terms of food pages and stuff like that. So it's not only about people and their bodies, but it's about you and what you can take and what your limitations are. I don't have a problem with workout pages. I have a problem with food pages. So I have to be careful.
I have a problem with food pages. I have a problem with workout pages.
Right. So it is about knowing where you are, being honest enough with yourself, and taking the necessary steps to guard yourself and guard your marriage from the things that are.
And if you might be wondering, how can a food page impact your marriage? So if, let's say that you are struggling in that area in terms of self-image and insecurity, that can impact your marriage to the point that no, if you're someone dealing with insecurity, how you relate to your spouse will be impacted, because it's just going to skew and taint everything that happens.
Because your focus is, oh my gosh, I don't like how I look in this clothes. I don't like how this feels. I don't like, and I don't have enough clothes, and I don't have, and so it becomes this bashing almost of yourself, and this over.
And you don't expect your spouse to know what is exactly. So there may be a need for affirmation that you can't even articulate, because you don't know that is happening, and they know that may cause an unnecessary argument because you just weren't even sure what was happening.
Right. So just to wrap on the social media point, Philippians 4:8, just focus on the things that are true and noble and honorable and pure and admirable, the things that build and not tear down, and be very aware, and this now generally, be very aware and
of the outside influences, every single thing, because there's a topic that we didn't touch on today that's very important, is the spiritual battles that marriages face. Marriages are pretty much under attack. Marriages are the world is wanting marriage to just be viewed as something that you get to determine and choose what it is and what it isn't. And so there's this battle that we have as Christians to have truly godly marriages. And so we really have to be careful and be mindful how we speak about our marriage, who we let into our marriage, what we feed ourselves for relating to marriage. And it has to be this conscious and intentional decision to just have the kind of marriage that will glorify God.
Right. And what we should never, ever, ever lose sight of is the fact that it is God who created marriage, and it is meant to be a reflection of Him and His love. Him and His love. That is what it is about, which means that the enemy is always trying to tear it down. He's always trying to cast doubt on it. And so he will continue to try and break it down. The family is the most basic unit of society. And with the enemy has no issue playing the long game, none. So he will come at you. He will come at your marriage. He will come at your family with the intention of tearing down a nation. So let's just be very clear that this union, your union, whether it exists now or it is to come, understand that it is a powerful thing in the kingdom of God. And the enemy is going to come at you. So you have a responsibility. Each of you in that union have a responsibility to submit yourself wholly and completely to God. and submit your marriage, your union to God, so that it can be a true reflection of him and his love, so that his kingdom will be built through you. So it is so marriage is not just signing a piece of paper. Marriage is a commitment, it is a covenant, and it is a ministry. There is a responsibility that comes with a marriage. And if you are children of God, understand you will get a fight, but you are already victorious because you are in Christ. So I think
yes, I mean that's pretty much, I think, everything that we wanted to cover here today. If you do have any questions, we'll just pause to see if there are any lingering questions that's below. We're asking you again, please, to share this video, share it with your friends, share it, send them. What we find is that if there's a personal share, if you say to someone, hey, I like this channel, I like what they're about, their content is XYZ, whatever it is you think, share it. We find that that's a lot more effective than even us sharing it, because there has to be a personal connection with our content for it to resonate with people in that way. So we really do ask you to share with your friends, share with those who you think that our videos can help. We are going to be starting a new series next week. Is it next week? Okay, we're starting a new series soon, but definitely if you have not subscribed yet, please do so. Is there anything?
Yeah, so Michaela says that the more she listens to us, the more she learns that our relationship with God is such an example.
Yeah,
very, very
it is
true.
meant to be. It is meant to be.
Right. And I mean, he tells us in his word that when he says that the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church, that's exactly what it is. That is the likening there. And yes, we do set boundaries in Christendom, in our walk.
Exactly.
Our Christian walk, and that helps us to set boundaries in our marriage and in all our relationships. So so thanks for that, Michaela. And yeah, in closing, we just want to remind everyone or reiterate the importance of identifying boundaries.
Yes.
To outside of your marriage. So there's a conversation about boundaries within the marriage, as in between husband and wife.
Should there be boundaries?
Should there be boundaries? Like, that's a conversation to have, guys.
Yeah.
What should there be boundaries, and what should they look like?
Yeah.
If they're supposed to be there?
Renee thinks there should be no boundaries.
So we're talking about boundaries outside of your marriage in protecting your marriage, right? Yeah. So with that, it may be different for each person who is listening. Your boundaries may look different, but it is important to identify what they are. It is important for both of you within the marriage to have that conversation with each other, to agree upon it, to have alignment where that is concerned. Yeah. Because if one person thinks that it is okay to flirt and the other one doesn't, you're going to end up with hurt.
Yeah.
You're going to end up with hurt. And that is bringing things out of alignment, and therefore
there would be
bringing challenges.
No agreement in that situation.
Correct. So it is very important. We can't overemphasize communication with each other, being transparent with each other, even when you don't fully understand what you're feeling, or you don't fully understand what your challenges are. Have that communicated to your spouse, to say, I'm not feeling great right now. I'm not sure why, but these are the things that happen. These are the things that have triggered.
If there are moments that you can't even understand what you're feeling or why, approach it in prayer together, because sometimes it is nothing more than a spiritual attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're very
Yeah.
they're very real and very, very subtle sometimes. So you don't even realize what is happening. So again, having that support of your spouse or that support, otherwise, if you're not yet married, is very important to be able to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And I can't put my finger on why it is. And you can pray about it, because what we have the Holy Spirit, and He knows our hearts. He searches our hearts, right? He knows what it is that we're going through, what it is that we're feeling, and can therefore bring revelation.
Yeah.
So, guys,
I think that's it.
yeah.
Yes, so before you go, if you're watching this on YouTube, go to the videos section of our page. We have over 30 videos on our YouTube channel. Check to see if there may be one or two videos that you have not seen. If you're subscribed, turn on the notification bell so that you'll be reminded whenever we post a new video. If you're watching this from Facebook, go to the video section. This is our 6th or 7th live, so check to see what other lives that you may have missed. We're also on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok. So check us out. You may have videos that you might have missed. So yeah, we just want to thank you so much for watching. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Guys, have a blessed week. We will see you again next week at 4.